So if I'm going to take the time to dedicate an entire video to the types of gaming experiences that I will not play on the Steam Deck, well, it stands to reason that of course I should follow that up with a list of games, or types of games I guess, that I absolutely adore playing on the Steam Deck. Now here's the thing, for most of the games that I won't play on the Steam Deck, it really comes down to matters of performance. But that's just it, the Steam Deck is not by any stretch of the imagination an underpowered machine, it's just that it is slightly underpowered compared to the type of hardware you would need to really get a top tier visual experience. But for the types of games that I'll be going over on today's video, those really won't be a concern because if it's on this list, that means that on a technical level it definitely performs well on the deck, or it might be not just that it just, performs well from a technical level in terms of graphical prowess, but also that it just might be particularly well suited to handheld play. So, all that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right in with the first category of games that I love playing on the Steam Deck, admittedly a really broad category, but that would be indie games. And I say this is broad because these can be as straightforward as Flappy Bird clones, or as deep and vexing as games like The Witness. But for the sake of discussion, when I say indie games on Steam Deck, really what I'm referring to are games that are just made by a very small team of creators, or in some cases only a single creator, and one of the hallmarks of games like that is that they tend to be very unique and creative simply because they're way more willing to take risks than what you see from some of the bigger publishers. In turn, that usually means that they have much smaller budgets to work with and have to get a lot more creative with their efforts. And this tends to work out especially well for the Steam Deck because a lot of the times these types of games don't have, incredibly taxing graphics, and in turn you can expect to get some pretty stellar battery life whenever you play indies on the Steam Deck. Now sometimes these are entirely fresh ordeals like Dave the Diver, but then in other cases you have indie devs who really just pay incredibly loving homage to the games that got them excited for games in the first place, which is probably why we see a lot of Metroidvanias in the indie space. All of these combine to make indie games one of my favorite genres to explore on the Steam Deck, and considering a lot of indie games start in early access on PC, a lot of the time you can play exciting new games in this vein way before they drop on consoles, and in some cases when you start following the creators themselves, you can sort of ride along for their development journey by checking out early demos and providing feedback. Such was the case with Echoes of the Living, which I've been keeping a very close eye on, and should be coming out soon. And this kind of brings me to my next category of games that I just personally really love to play on the Steam Deck, and it has a lot of crossover with indie games. Now I don't think I would say that indie games necessarily have a monopoly on this particular style of game, but I will say you see a lot more unique entries from indie developers than you see from AAA publishers in a lot of cases, and that would be story-heavy, just narrative games. Now in my mind, handheld gaming is essentially the video game equivalent of curling up with a good book. And because of that, the Steam Deck is a wonderful way to experience a great story. Not just because you can take it with you anywhere, but personally I love to play story-rich games in bed or in my living room with big fluffy headphones on, so I can just get completely immersed in the story. And there are lots of great narrative-rich titles to explore on the Steam Deck. Some that come to mind include Killer Frequency, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Anno Mutation M, Beacon Pines, Firewatch, Gone Home. I mean, the list goes on and on. And while I will admit that a lot of these types of games tend to fall into the subcategory of walking simulators, there are a lot still that also feature thrilling mechanics while telling a great story, and that would include games like Hi-Fi Rush or Chorus. Plus, the same way that you would think of a book as having chapters, one of the things that I've found about story-rich games is, whenever they're really focused on telling a great story above all else, that means in turn they don't tend to drag on endlessly or anything like that, and usually have pretty good pacing. And in turn that makes it really natural to find good stopping points while you're playing so that you can recharge your Steam Deck or just yourself if you want to take a break while still feeling like you've made a little bit of progress. Now on the flip side, as much as I appreciate a well-told story and richly developed characters and a solid sense of progression, this next type of game eschews almost everything else in the interest of just making sure the gameplay loop is interesting and addictive, and that type of game would be low-stress simulator games that are just designed for you to chill out with. Games like this fall firmly into the category of mindless fun or busy work, where the gameplay takes center stage and the story either takes a back seat or honestly just didn't make it into the car at all. Really, the most appealing reason to play these is that they offer a satisfying, if not straight up addictive gameplay loop. You're not in a struggle to survive, time's never really of the essence, and penalties for poor play are either non-existent or just so slap on the wristy that it's easy to get lost in these for hours. Some personal examples that I've enjoyed include Farm Together, Power Wash Simulator, Grow, Song of the Evertree, Dwarf Romantic, Forager, and again, any game that just has really addictive gameplay loops and tends to be very cutesy in presentation a lot of the time, and again, just doesn't have a lot of story to speak of. In fact, I would say this particular type of game is essentially the antithesis of the story-heavy game, and it lends itself exceptionally well to what I call second screen gaming, where you just fire up a game on your Steam Deck and then just throw something on that's, familiar and comforting on the TV in the background, like a favorite show or a movie or something like that. And the game is really just so non-existent in the story department or what it demands of you that you can basically play it on autopilot. But hey, a little bit of stress or that sense of accomplishment you get from overcoming a particularly difficult challenge in a video game is one of the things that makes gaming fun, and that's why this next category might just be my favorite favorite on the Steam Deck out of everything that I play there, and that would be 6th or 7th generation action games that originally I played on console, but have been given new life for me on PC as I've adopted the Steam Deck. Now, there are a lot of games that I love from this era of console gaming, and a lot of them are playable on PC, so it's really fun to revisit them. But then also, there are even more games that have just kind of rotted on my backlog for years, and now I have this second shot at enjoying them on a system that I can chuck in my backpack, play anywhere, and still get pretty stellar battery life. Now, over the past couple of years with the deck, as I've been making videos here on the channel, I've already covered a lot of these, and honestly, it's a little bit overwhelming just how many of these games there are that I really want to finish on the deck. Examples would include Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Sleeping Dogs, Enslaved Odyssey to the West, Mad Max. It's just awesome that so many games that I played on a home console can now be played on the palm of my hand, and typically at greater visual fidelity with a better frame rate than what I had the first go around. And again, even with that bump in performance, most of the games that fit this mold haven't really taxed a graphics card in any significant way since like the early 2010s. So you're definitely not going to have to sweat reaching for a backup battery in most cases, because it's entirely possible you can squeeze 3 to 5 hours of play out of games that fit this description. These just represent really video games, and they may not have the best story, and some of the mechanics are obviously going to feel a little bit dated, but they're still great fun nonetheless, and for me have been an absolute perfect fit for the Steam Deck. And finally, because it's a sickness and I just really love playing horror games, particularly those of the low poly variety, that would be the final category of games that I love to play on the Steam Deck: horror stuff. Scary stuff, spooky stuff, whatever you want to call it, anything that gets under your skin a little bit, and even more so when you're completely absorbed in the system and you just have on some big fluffy headphones. And really any type of horror will do, but much like those 6th and 7th gen action games that I like, I tend to prefer horror games that do a lot with a little rather than rely on raw technical horsepower to set up the atmosphere. No disrespect to games like Alan Wake 2 or Dead Space Remake or anything, there's just something to be said for games that can build tension through storytelling, mechanics, and art direction, and those are exactly the sort of horror experiences that I like on a portable. Now, I already went over my rationale for this in a previous video some time back about why portable horror games are so great to begin with, but long story short, it's just incredibly unsettling to get up close and personal with a game like Signalis while you're locked into a sound cocoon with headphones and just completely immersed in something unsettling while it's completely dark. I know I catch at least some flack for constantly talking about games like this on the channel, but you know, you love what you love, right? And for me, that's low poly PS1 aesthetics that just really take me back to like the mid to late 90s when I really started to explore that genre. Alright, and that's about it for this one. Honestly, I've played hundreds and hundreds of games at this point on the Steam Deck as I continue to kind of buffet style just bounce around a ton of different offerings that you can play there, but when I really look back at the games that I enjoyed most personally, these were sort of the broad categories that most spoke to me as a player of the Steam Deck and, you know, the games I'm most likely to indulge in my leisure time. But hey, what about you? Are there any particular genres or types of games that you like to play most on the Steam Deck? If so, I would love to hear all about it. As always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here on the channel. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.